The crisp mountain air of Colorado bit at my cheeks as I stood at the gates of Blackstone Range. I tightened my grip on the registration form, feeling the weight of every judgmental glance from the men in designer shooting gear. Blackstone wasn't just any gun club, it was an exclusive world where women were barely tolerated, let alone welcomed. As I stepped inside, conversations dulled to awkward silence. My name was Elena Carter, accountant by trade, soldier by blood. They didn't know me, and they definitely didn't know what was coming. I wasn't here to ask for permission. I came to take my shot. The interior of Blackstone Range radiated quiet hostility the moment Elena stepped through the door. The walls lined with plaques and framed photos of male champions seemed to sneer at her presence. Every pair of eyes followed her as she crossed the immaculate lobby toward the registration desk, clutching her paperwork with steady hands. The man behind the desk barely glanced up at first. When he did, his cool appraisal carried the weight of years spent enforcing an unspoken code. This was a place for men. Elena presented her forms without hesitation, knowing what would come next. The man's thin lips curled into something between disbelief and irritation as he reviewed her application. Around them, whispers traveled like electricity. Expensively dressed shooters exchanged knowing smirks, silently predicting her humiliation before it had even begun. She was sent toward the advanced division not with approval, but with the dismissive wave of someone confident he would soon be proven right. Thomas Caldwell, the club president, and his son Ryan stood back, arms crossed, waiting for the inevitable failure. Elena's heart rate remained steady. She had met this resistance before. As she walked toward lane 12, the sneers behind her barely registered. She was here for something bigger. The shooting bay stretched ahead, cold and clinical beneath harsh overhead lights. Elena set her gear down at lane 12, aware of the silent crowd gathering just beyond the barrier. They expected a spectacle, a lesson in failure to reinforce their rigid hierarchy. She ignored them, focusing instead on the rifle provided by the club. It was high quality, but subtly misaligned, no doubt tampered with to disrupt her rhythm. She adjusted the stock and sights with the calm, practiced hands of someone who had done this under far greater pressure. The first target stood at 100 yards, a warm-up for serious competitors. Elena exhaled slowly, calculated wind distance and humidity instinctively, and fired. The sharp crack of the shot cut through the tension, followed by stunned silence as the target was reeled in with a perfect center hit. The second round brought a 200-yard challenge under simulated crosswinds. Elena's focus never wavered. 3 shots merged into one ragged hole, erasing any doubt of beginner's luck. The final test introduced moving targets at variable distances. Spectators who once chuckled now watched in growing disbelief as Elena executed each shot with fluid efficiency. The unthinkable had happened. She had passed every stage flawlessly. The whispers had turned into uneasy murmurs as Elena stepped away from the firing line. What began as smug amusement had shifted to stunned silence. The scoreboard, unflinching and brutally honest, told the truth no one could deny. Perfect shots, unwavering accuracy. Men who had barely acknowledged her presence now exchanged glances of disbelief and reluctant respect. Yet Elena knew this was only the beginning. Thomas Caldwell and his son stood rigid at the edge of the crowd, their expressions unreadable, but their body language betraying frustration. She had upset the order they so carefully maintained. Her flawless performance was a direct challenge to the unspoken rules of Blackstone Range. In the quiet corner of the observation area, Colonel David Monroe watched with a faint, knowing smile. The silver chain barely visible beneath Elena's collar had not escaped his attention. Recognition flickered in his eyes. He alone understood the years of disciplined sacrifice and grit that had forged her skill. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Elena remained composed, unaffected by the shifting energy around her. She had no interest in their approval. The first battle had been won not just on the range, but against the weight of expectation and silent condescension. The following days brought a cold shift in atmosphere. Elena noticed it immediately. Subtle changes, lingering stares, conversations that stopped when she passed. Behind the closed doors of the boardroom, plans were quietly forming. The club's inner circle, led by Thomas and Ryan, could not accept what had happened. They dug into her background, frustrated to find sealed military records and dead ends. The lack of civilian competition history only deepened their suspicions. If they couldn't disqualify her through paperwork, they would undermine her confidence. On the day of the exhibition match, Elena found the equipment altered ever so slightly. The rifle's balance felt off. The wind simulation display on the range showed readings that subtly contradicted the actual breeze she could sense on her skin. It was a calculated trap designed to sabotage her performance without drawing official scrutiny. Calmly, she prepared anyway. The range had never been so crowded. Members who rarely appeared gathered shoulder to shoulder, their breath visible in the cold air of the state-of-the-art indoor facility. The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation and thinly veiled skepticism. Elena stood at the firing station under the harsh spotlight, her silhouette calm and deliberate against the backdrop of towering digital screens. The rifle felt subtly off balance, a small but deliberate handicap introduced to break her rhythm. More insidious was the manipulation of the wind simulation system, which displayed inaccurate readings that would have sent any ordinary marksman chasing phantom gusts. But Elena was no ordinary competitor. Years of battlefield experience had taught her to trust more than just instruments. She closed her mind to the false data and relied on pure instinct and skill. One by one, her shots rang out with crisp finality. Each projectile carved a perfect path through the distorted currents, embedding itself exactly where she intended. The technicians behind the glass exchanged uneasy glances as the data streamed in. By the final shot, the pattern had tightened into a near-perfect cluster. Then it was Thomas's turn. With the sabotage reversed for him, his shots landed close to center but lacked Elena's precision. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the final results appeared on the towering display. Elena's shots had exceeded not only his, but also the system's standard tracking thresholds. For a moment, disbelief rippled across the room. Spectators stared at the screen, then at the unassuming woman calmly lowering her rifle. She had defeated not only an opponent, but the entire culture of exclusion standing behind him. The murmurs started soft and grew louder, as respect, admiration, and awe slowly replaced doubt. The crowd lingered, unwilling to leave the charged silence that followed the impossible result. Eyes darted from the screens to Elena, as if searching for the missing piece of an unsolvable puzzle. Near the back, Colonel David Monroe stepped forward, his weathered face calm but purposeful. He had seen enough. The faint glint of the silver chain at Elena's collar was all the confirmation he needed. Only a select few in military circles would recognize the insignia attached to those tags. Without fanfare or hesitation, Monroe addressed the gathered members, his presence alone, silencing any whispered speculation. What followed sent a collective ripple of disbelief through the room. Monroe explained the truth the very system Blackstone Range had invested in so proudly. The advanced tracking algorithms and calibration protocols had been originally designed by none other than Elena Carter during her service with the Advanced Tactical Systems Division. The realization dawned, slowly transforming expressions of skepticism into stunned respect. Elena stood motionless, her quiet dignity unwavering under the weight of their collective gaze. In that moment, the narrative shifted. She was no longer an outsider who had embarrassed their champion. She was the architect of the technology they revered, and the barrier between acceptance and exclusion finally cracked. Months passed, and the rigid walls of Blackstone Range began to shift. Where once the photographs on display showcased only a narrow image of tradition, they now reflected a new era. Women, young shooters, and diverse members filled the frames, their determination immortalized alongside the club's old guard. The membership expanded, energized by the opportunity to learn in an environment transformed by quiet revolution. Elena, now technical director and lead instructor, approached her new role with the same precision she brought to the range. Her redesign of the training program emphasized accessibility and mastery For all, not just the privileged few. Under her guidance, the advanced tracking system, once flawed and exclusive, became a cornerstone for fair and challenging development. Even the once defiant Thomas Caldwell found his place in this evolving world, embracing his role as club historian and mentor to older members. The facility's grand reopening, marked by the unveiling of a dedicated training center for women and youth, stood as a testament to what had been accomplished. As Elena stood watching a young girl hit her first target, a soft smile crossed her face. The girl's triumph mirrored her own journey, a reminder that true value lies not in appearances, but in the courage to defy expectations.